Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here representing Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I want to chat with you guys and gals a little bit about the fact that the supplement industry has convinced us that we need more protein than we actually need. But a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so, and if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I'd appreciate it so much. Thank you, and let's get over to the point. Now, that being said, I still occasionally use protein shakes. I think protein powders are perfectly fine. But what we need to be aware of, just because a product is useful doesn't mean that there hasn't been ridiculous amounts of clever marketing telling you that you need way more of it than you need. And this really, the big one that started was not just the protein intakes. That's where we're at now. It was the original, hey, you can only absorb 30 grams of protein in one sitting. Okay, that's your most. You guys go back and look at what the average protein shake content was when that myth was started, 25 to 30 grams. Okay, so we need to be aware of that history there. Well, that's been completely debunked. We know that there's no upper threshold, and I'm not telling people to get all of your protein in one meal. Even though I personally intermittent fast and I have a fairly tight afternoon feed window, there's still protein is still obviously going to be spaced out. You're getting multiple meals, but again, the data even shows that even intermittent fasting like that doesn't interfere with muscle growth, like when it's looked at in studies. So the same thing with the protein. Like this has been studied, and they found that when you consume 100 grams of protein in a single meal, it has just as much muscle protein synthesis. It's just that it lasts longer, right? It doesn't spike as high. It gets to the same level that, say, 30 grams does, and it just sustains for more hours, and it just stays there. Whereas if you're doing the smaller 30, you keep spiking back up to it multiple times. But the net effect ended up being no difference in muscle protein synthesis. This was a study done a couple years ago, pretty big study, really digging into it to see, hey, if we just give 100 grams at one time, is there any loss, net loss? And there wasn't. So that's, again, kind of supports what we know there. But that was used to sell protein shakes, and it's the same thing with the ultra-high intakes. And I want people to think about that. What are the odds that it would turn out that muscle growth was optimized with 1 gram per pound of body weight? Okay, I want people to stop and think for a moment, does that sound even remotely right? People say, well, no, it sounds about right. No, because you've been told it's about right. Really, this is the supplement industry saying, hey, this is what we need. They didn't know. They had no idea. But they did notice, hey, if we had higher protein intakes, everyone noticed, yeah, we gain more muscle. But no one had really sat down and really dug in biochemistry and studying it of where things capped, where growth capped at in bodybuilders, athletes. That wasn't done for years. That was done for almost for decades, really, right? Because we didn't even have the equipment to measure all of it. But we do today. So they just said that number. But stop and think about that. And here's why it's funny. Really, it's going to turn out to be exactly a 1-to-1. 1 gram per pound of body weight of 2 completely different measurement systems. One of these is the imperial system, right? What we use in the U.S. still pounds. The other is the metric system. Literally a direct 1-to-1 carryover is going to be perfect. Do you guys think about that? Really? It's literally adding a metric measurement as a ratio to pounds in a perfect 1-to-1. Come on. Reality, it turns out to be about 0.8. And actually the math that I think they kind of came up with was because they found when they measured it all in metric, grams per kilogram of body weight, it ended up being, right around 1.5 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is where muscle growth capped out. Okay, and this is pretty heavily studied, and this assumes a mixed protein diet. Obviously, the higher the protein quality, hypothetically, can be lower. That's why some of the studies found as low as a gram per pound of body weight, but that was when they were extremely high biased towards animal source, right? Makes sense? Because when it's been studied in vegans actually struggle on a purely plant-based, even that 1.3 gram per pound of body weight. When it's 100% plant-based, at least one study found some actual problems with actual muscle growth, right? The test subjects actually didn't gain any muscle at all, and they struggled to maintain strength at that. It was actually difficult for trained lifters who had already been eating animal source. So again, that's starting to get too low depending upon protein quality, but it makes sense the bioavailability is lower. But they found it can be as low as a gram or a little more per pound of body weight if it's almost all high quality, high bioavailable animal source protein, right? But realistically, on a mixed food diet, it's right around that 1.5. And what's been found is that people don't really gain muscle, including when it's been studied in serious competitive bodybuilders, when it's been studied in like even Olympic weightlifters. Like this has been studied in people, even professional bodybuilders. And the same thing was noted, that I remember Nasser, way back in the day, massive bodybuilder, again, huge guy, pro bodybuilder. So he went for a whole year. He's like, I dropped down to 150 grams of protein just based on some of the science. He goes, I gained just as much muscle between Olympias as I did the year before on only 150 grams of protein, going all the way in for a year. He's like, I had no problems at all. I saw no difference in gains, cutting all the way down to that from like 300, right? So what does that tell you? Okay, but the supplement industry convinced us all we need that gram per pound. And I'm not saying it's a bad number. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not reasonable, because it's overshooting, but it's not bad, unless you just don't want to eat that much protein. And if you don't, you're going to see no difference. The problem is then the industry pushed it higher. You guys, I'm young enough to remember. I'm old enough to remember. I'm 48. When the industry for a while had coaches who worked for supplement companies and sponsored by them, telling people even in magazines, I have all my bodybuilders do 2 grams per pound of body weight. And it's like, for a longer center talking about, he's taking his serious bodybuilders and putting them on 500 grams of protein a day. And some of these people are advocating this, but they were literally sponsored people by Muscle Tech and some of these other protein companies. Okay, it just got crazier and crazier for a while. And the reality is, we don't even actually need the full gram per pound. And people say, well, I need it for an insurance. Well, you really don't. The insurance policy is to hit the 1.5 grams per pound of body, which is about 0.8 grams. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's 160 grams of protein, guys. For those not carrying the numbers over, about 150, 160 grams. You'll be perfectly fine. No problems at all gaining any amount of muscle you want on the protein side.